Alex had always been curious about the deeper mysteries of existence. For years, meditation and mindfulness had been his pathways to exploring consciousness, but lately he felt drawn to something more intense, more profound. After months of research and preparation, he finally decided to experience DMT. The setting was a quiet evening at home. His bedroom was dimly lit by soft, warm light, and he had arranged a comfortable space. With everything in place, Alex picked up the glass pipe, hands trembling slightly. The DMT crystals melted as he held the lighter beneath the bowl, creating a thick, white vapor. He took a deep breath and inhaled deeply, holding the vapor in his lungs. Almost instantly, a high-pitched ringing filled his ears, and a sense of warmth spread throughout his body. He exhaled slowly, and the room around him began to shimmer and vibrate. The colors in the room intensified, and the walls seemed to breathe, pulsing with life. As he took a second hit, the vibrations increased until they became overwhelming, and the world around him began to dissolve. As Alex closed his eyes, he felt as if he were being pulled backward through layers of reality. A tunnel of light appeared before him, swirling with intricate patterns and shapes that morphed and shifted with impossible speed. He was propelled through the tunnel at an incredible velocity, the sound of rushing wind filling his consciousness. The further he traveled, the less he felt connected to his physical body. It was as though his mind had detached completely, leaving behind the world he knew. Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a vast, expansive space, an endless, iridescent void filled with pulsating, geometric forms. The colors were beyond anything Alex had ever seen, brilliant, luminescent hues that seemed to radiate from within. The shapes around him danced and folded into one another, creating an ever-changing landscape of fractals and patterns. He was no longer moving. Instead, he floated in this alien space, completely awestruck by the beauty and complexity that surrounded him. As he adjusted to the new surroundings, Alex sensed he was not alone. From the shimmering patterns emerged entities, beings of pure light and energy. They were humanoid in form, but entirely otherworldly, with bodies made of shifting, prismatic light. Their eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with a deep, knowing intelligence. Despite their alien nature, Alex felt no fear, only a deep sense of curiosity and wonder. One of the entities approached him, its presence radiating warmth and a profound sense of peace. Though it did not speak, Alex understood it perfectly. The entity communicated directly to his mind, conveying thoughts and feelings rather than words. It showed him images, memories from his own life, scenes of joy and pain, moments of clarity and confusion. The entity seemed to be teaching him, guiding him to see the interconnectedness of all things. At one point, the entity reached out with what Alex could only describe as a hand, touching his forehead. Instantly, his mind expanded, and he was flooded with a torrent of knowledge and insight. He saw the intricate web of life, the flow of energy that connects all living things, and the infinite cycles of birth, death, and rebirth. It was as though he was being shown the blueprint of the universe, a glimpse into the very fabric of reality itself. Just as quickly as it had begun, the experience started to recede. The entities began to fade, their light dimming as the vibrant geometric landscape started to dissolve. Alex felt himself being pulled back through the tunnel, the rushing sensation returning as he hurtled towards his physical body. The vivid colors and shapes slowly gave way to the familiar, dimly lit surroundings of his living room. When he opened his eyes, the world seemed to snap back into place, but it felt different, strange, and almost surreal. He was aware of his body again, the weight of his limbs, the soft cushions beneath him. Alex blinked, trying to process what had just happened. It felt as though he had been gone for hours, but a glance at the clock told him that only 15 minutes had passed. His heart was still racing, and his mind was swirling with the images and sensations from the trip. In the hours that followed, Alex found himself in a reflective, almost meditative state. The experience had been far more intense and profound than he had anticipated. He struggled to put into words what he had seen and felt. The knowledge imparted to him by the entity was still fresh in his mind, but it was difficult to translate it into language. It was as though he had been given a glimpse of something vast and incomprehensible, something that transcended ordinary human experience. As the days passed, the insights from the trip began to integrate into his everyday life. He felt a renewed sense of connection to the world around him, a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. The boundaries that once seemed so solid, between himself and others, between life and death, between the physical and the spiritual, now appeared more fluid, more permeable. The experience left him with a profound sense of awe and reverence for the mysteries of the universe. He knew that he would carry the memory of that journey with him for the rest of his life, a reminder of the infinite possibilities that lie beyond the veil of ordinary reality. Jake had heard about DMT from a few friends, all of whom described it as a life-changing experience. They spoke of vibrant, otherworldly landscapes and encounters with benevolent beings that offered profound insights into the nature of reality. Intrigued by these stories and driven by a recent period of existential doubt, Jake decided to try it for himself. He wanted answers, or at least some clarity. It was a cool evening, and Jake was alone in his apartment. The room was familiar, a place where he felt safe. He had spent the day meditating, trying to center himself and clear his mind of any negativity. He was nervous but determined. With the DMT pipe in hand, he took a deep breath and lit the crystals. As the vapor filled his lungs, Jake felt an immediate shift. The room began to blur, and his body felt like it was vibrating at an incredibly high frequency. His heart raced as he took a second deeper hit, holding it in as long as he could. The air around him seemed to crackle with energy, and his vision fragmented into a kaleidoscope of colors and patterns. The familiar world dissolved rapidly, as though it were being torn apart by some unseen force. He closed his eyes, hoping to ease the intensity, but instead, he found himself hurtling through a dark tunnel, its walls lined with jagged, pulsating shapes. The sound of his own heartbeat pounded in his ears, growing louder and louder until it was almost deafening. Suddenly, Jake was ejected from the tunnel into a vast, dimly lit space. The colors here were muted and sickly, a stark contrast to the vibrant hues he had been expecting. He felt disoriented, as though gravity itself was shifting around him. The atmosphere was thick, oppressive, and the air seemed to hum with a low, ominous frequency. As he tried to make sense of his surroundings, he noticed movement in the shadows. Shapes began to emerge from the darkness, figures that seemed to be watching him. His heart sank as they came into focus. They were clowns, but not the kind from a circus. Their faces were grotesque and exaggerated, with wide, leering grins that stretched far beyond what should have been possible. Their eyes were hollow, dark voids that seemed to pierce right through him. Panic set in as the clowns began to encircle Jake, their movements erratic and unpredictable. They didn't speak, but he could feel their malevolent intent. The clowns began to laugh, a low, guttural sound that reverberated through the space, shaking him to his core. The laughter grew louder, more frenzied, echoing all around him until it felt like it was inside his head. The sound was maddening, a chaotic cacophony that made it impossible to think. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the clowns had stolen his voice, leaving him powerless and trapped. The clown's face began to change, shifting and warping into something even more horrifying, an amalgamation of fear, mockery, and pure malevolence. It seemed to be feeding on his terror, its eyes gleaming with sadistic delight. Suddenly, the clown's face split open, revealing an endless black void within. Jake felt as though he were being pulled into it, sucked into a darkness from which there would be no return. The other clowns began to chant in a language he couldn't understand, their voices rising in a twisted harmony that made his skin crawl. The space around him started to collapse, the walls closing in as the void grew larger, threatening to consume him completely. Just when he thought he couldn't take any more, Jake felt a sudden jolt, like a rubber band snapping back into place. The clowns and the void vanished, and he found himself back in his apartment. The transition was abrupt and jarring, leaving him gasping for breath. The room was still spinning. The shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and twist, but the oppressive weight of the DMT realm had lifted. His body was drenched in sweat, and his heart pounded in his chest. The music he had chosen earlier played softly in the background, but it felt distant, almost surreal. He glanced around the room, half expecting to see the clowns lurking in the corners, but thankfully they were gone. For hours after the experience, Jake sat in silence, trying to process what had just happened. The fear was still palpable, lingering like a dark cloud in his mind. He had heard of people having difficult trips before, but nothing had prepared him for the sheer terror he had just endured. The clowns, with their grotesque faces and twisted smiles, haunted his thoughts. He couldn't shake the feeling that they had shown him something dark and hidden within himself, a reflection of fears he had long buried. But what was their purpose? Were they simply manifestations of his subconscious, or had he tapped into something far more sinister? As the night wore on, Jake knew one thing for certain. He would need time to come to terms with this experience. DMT had shown him a side of reality, or perhaps a side of himself, that he had never wanted to see. The journey was over, but the memory of those clowns, with their leering grins and hollow eyes, would stay with him forever, a reminder of the darkness that sometimes lies just beyond the veil of consciousness. One of the most compelling arguments for the reality of DMT entities is the consistency with which they appear across different users' experiences. Despite the personal and subjective nature of psychedelic trips, many users report encountering similar beings, such as machine elves, jesters, insectoid creatures, or wise, all-knowing figures. This consistency is often cited as evidence that these entities exist in some form of reality independent of the user's mind. If DMT entities were purely hallucinations or figments of the imagination, one might expect a wider variety of beings and experiences, as personal biases and subconscious elements would shape the visions. However, the recurrence of specific entities and environments suggests that users might be accessing a shared dimension or realm where these beings exist. Some proponents believe that DMT allows the user to access a parallel dimension or alternate reality, a hyperspace, where these entities reside. This hypothesis suggests that the DMT experience is not just an altered state of consciousness, but a form of dimensional travel, where the entities encountered are as real as anything in our physical world. The hyperspace hypothesis draws parallels to the many-worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics and other scientific theories that propose the existence of parallel universes. In this view, DMT entities are inhabitants of another dimension, and DMT serves as the vehicle that allows the user to perceive them. From a spiritual perspective, many users interpret their encounters with DMT entities as interactions with divine beings, spirits, or other supernatural entities. Some see these beings as messengers from a higher realm, offering guidance, wisdom, or insight into the nature of reality. In various cultures, similar experiences have been reported in religious or shamanic contexts, where they are often considered sacred or mystical encounters. Throughout history, humans have reported contact with non-human entities during mystical experiences, often interpreting them as gods, angels, or spirits. The similarity between these encounters and those reported during DMT trips suggests that these entities could be part of a larger spiritual or metaphysical reality. One of the most straightforward explanations for DMT entities is that they are a product of the brain's altered chemistry under the influence of the drug. DMT is known to affect the brain's serotonin receptors, particularly the 5-HT2A receptor, which plays a crucial role in regulating mood, perception, and cognition. The brain's altered state during a DMT trip can lead to vivid hallucinations and a sense of encountering other beings. The brain is capable of generating incredibly complex and realistic hallucinations, as seen in dreams, schizophrenia, or even during intense stress or trauma. DMT entities could simply be a product of the brain's response to the drug, creating vivid, lifelike experiences that feel real but are, in fact, purely internal. Another argument against the reality of DMT entities is that they are projections of the user's subconscious mind. This theory posits that the entities represent aspects of the self, such as repressed emotions, desires, or fears. The mind uses these internal aspects, creating the illusion of separate, sentient beings. Many psychedelic experiences, including those induced by DMT, are highly symbolic and can be interpreted as the mind's way of processing deep psychological material. The entities encountered may be symbolic representations rather than actual beings, serving as a mirror for the user's inner world. Cultural and societal influences play a significant role in shaping our perceptions and experiences. The prevalence of certain types of DMT entities, such as machine elves or insectoid beings, could be influenced by the popularization of these concepts in psychedelic culture. As more people share their experiences, others may subconsciously adopt similar expectations, which then manifest during their own trips. The human mind is highly suggestible, especially in altered states of consciousness. If a person goes into a DMT experience having read or heard about others' encounters with specific entities, they may be more likely to encounter similar beings themselves. This doesn't necessarily mean the entities are real. It could simply be a case of cultural conditioning. Some theorists propose a middle ground in the debate, suggesting that while DMT entities may not exist in an objective, external reality, they could still be real, in a subjective or experiential sense. In this view, the entities are real to the person experiencing them, even if they are not independent beings in the physical world. The argument for subjective reality. This perspective acknowledges the power and significance of the DMT experience without making definitive claims about the objective existence of entities. The encounters are seen as meaningful, transformative, and valid experiences that can offer insight, healing, or spiritual growth. Whether the entities exist outside the mind is less important than the impact they have on the individual. The reality of DMT entities doesn't need to be binary, real or not real. They could exist as part of a subjective reality that is just as meaningful as the physical world. In this sense, the encounters are a form of real experience, deeply affecting the user's perception and understanding of themselves and the universe. The question of whether DMT entities are real remains unresolved, straddling the boundaries between science, spirituality, and philosophy. For some, the entities are undeniable proof of alternate realities or dimensions populated by sentient beings. For others, they are fascinating but ultimately hallucinatory constructs of the mind. As research into DMT and other psychedelics continues to advance, we may gain more insights into the nature of these experiences. However, the true nature of DMT entities, whether they are autonomous beings, projections of the mind, or something else entirely, may remain one of the greatest mysteries of human consciousness. In the end, the reality of DMT entities might be less about proving their existence and more about understanding what they represent and what they can teach us about the mind, the universe, and the boundaries of human perception. Whether real or imagined, the encounters with these entities challenge our understanding of reality, inviting us to explore the depths of consciousness and the mysteries that lie beyond. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please remember to like and subscribe.